You also visited Karachi. You also visited the Binori Mosque, which has been home to...
Yeah, Osama bin Laden company.
And you mentioned that you were about to enter the mosque and you came out.
And as we were actually on the footsteps, suddenly I saw a flicker of panic in my acquaintance's eyes. And he said, no, if they take you hostage there, you will not come back. Basically, it is not a nation state because it is built on an idea which has no evidence of success in history. It is built on the idea that Islam is sufficient as the basis of a nation state. Since Ayub, they have been power for so long. They have been in power forever. Generals in Pakistan are in power even when they are not in office.
And some questions on the present dynamic. And there were hundreds of thousands of people to welcome him. How do you see that transpiring? Because there's been always this whole apprehension that...
You must understand one thing, that for the Afghan, whether they Afghan are kings, Shahs, Karzais, Gilanis, civilian government, the key to their understanding of the state is Afghan nationalism.
It's been almost 12 to 13 years that your best-selling book Tinderbox was published. And some of the arguments that you make still hold true. And because this year we've had a rough patch in the Indo-Pak ties, we want to bring your book.
And Tinderbox is as much a story of the 19th century and of the sort of what I would call, what I've called in another essay, the romance of regression, which overtook the Muslim mind in the north of India. And this point is extremely important. What really is the nature of that attack that took place, the last attack took place, Pahalgam?
Right.
Munir's speech.
Right.
Which a few months ago, just before the awful terrorist attack. It's a speech of supremacism, not a supreme equality. That because we belong to a certain faith, we are superior, we are supremacist. But the moment you start stripping men in order to determine their religion and then kill them, then you're no longer what I would call a terrorist. You are indulging in fascist ethnic cleansing.
Why is it that it's only North India that has germinated, that has been home to myriad schools of thought in political Islam?
The North has been the scene of conflict for 1,000 years in a way that the South has never been. The North has seen shifting paradigms in the search for this elusive thing called an identity, right? What I would call factional identities rather than an Indian identity.
The Muslims who wanted to stay back in India, they had a very specific...
The majority of Muslims stayed back in India.
Exactly. So when we look into what the critics feel, that the moment they demanded a personal law, that itself becomes a kind of a conditional bargain. Is that true?
It took the Shah Bano case for awareness to be built up about the need for reform in Muslim law. And for a large number of reasons, there was a continuous effort to block reform. But in reality, we have moved a very long way.
Welcome to the new episode of Jan Man Gan. Today we have a very special guest with us, Mr. MJ Akbar. Mr. MJ Akbar is a veteran journalist. He's also served as the Minister of State for External Affairs and a prolific writer. He has authored almost a dozen books. Some of them have been bestsellers. Tinderbox, Shade of Swords, Gandhi's Hinduism, to name a few. And today, the topic of our discussion is Pakistan and how political Islam continues to shape the trajectory of the Indian subcontinent. Thank you so much, sir. So, let's start with our first question. It's been almost 12 to 13 years that your best-selling book Tinderbox was published. And some of the arguments that you make still hold true. And because this year we've had a rough patch in the Indo-Pak ties, we want to bring your book to discussion once again. Ever since you wrote that book, which also deals with your visit to Pakistan, have you felt that things have changed between India and Pakistan since you wrote that book? And how does the situation bring back the key discussions you make to the focus?
Pratik, the first thing you need to, and we need to understand, is a book is not journalism.
Right.
Journalism is a record of an immediate event, an immediate impression very often, and that kind of journalism, and so on and so forth. Perhaps an immediate analysis too, which has its place, as is well said. Journalism is the first draft of history, right? A book is history, at least my books are. And they examine the historical perspective from which dramatic changes to our geography, to our consciousness, to our attitudes, to our politics, to our thinking, to our behavior, to our perception of identity, how these have emerged. And Tinderbox is as much a story of the 19th century and of the sort of what I would call, what I've called in another essay, the romance of regression, which overtook the Muslim mind in the north of India. And I'm being very sort of particular because that is where it was shaped, in the north of India. And the collapse of their concept of the Mughal Empire rather than the Mughal Empire itself, and how these changes were then shaped through a well-known scholar of in the history of the Indian Islamic thought, Shah Waliullah, who actually emerged from the last madrasa which was set up by Aurangzeb in perhaps 1690. And Shah Waliullah was actually a normal academic until I think the change comes place with that hugely horrific event, which was the attack by Nadir Shah and the massacre that took place, massacre mainly of Muslims around Old Delhi,
Right.
which took place, and that, I mean, first the arrival of a Shia force which reinforced all the Sunni theologians' views of apostasy and so on and so forth, combined with the feeling of weakness and the desire to resurrect the strength which they once felt they had as a society and as parts of a ruling class, because theologians were part of the ruling class. And then that led to a very interesting theory that the revival of Muslims could only come from creating an artificial distance from Hindus. It is a very strange theory, but also in some senses was a kind of Indian reflection of the Wahhab's ideas, which were simultaneously, there was no particular bridge at that time until Sayyid Barelvi later on, at that time, and that it was taking place. And this led eventually in many leaps, not in one leap, but in many leaps, it eventually led to the demand by, again, the elite. I must say over and over again that this was not the will of the Muslim masses. This was the will of the Muslim ruling classes. And then this led to eventually the British abomination called separate electorates.
Right.
Unknown. Nowhere else in the history of democracy have you had a situation where one community is allowed to vote for only that community in a multi-ethnic society.
Right.
And that was the British nail on the coffin of Indian unity.
Right. You talk about separate electorates. Before that, I have a very small question. Because Shah Waliullah and his lineage, which all the way goes to the establishment of the Deoband school of thought, and how it also branches into the Pakistan movement. Can you also tell about this paradox, which also is part of your book, where on one hand the Shah Waliullah school of thought, it's increasingly advocating distance from the Hindus, and on the other hand, if you go into Deobandi thought, they are categorical about their role in the struggle against the British and the fact that they've been more aggressive when it comes to their opposition. So what are your thoughts?
I think first mistake perhaps here, which must be corrected immediately.
Right.
I don't think there is a single Deobandi school of thought.
Okay, that's very interesting.
Yes, there is one strand which comes in from there that might be called, shall we say, the heart strand. But the Madani family, which eventually became the modern Deoband,
Right.
and this emerged out of the 1910s and the fight against the British, which became the post-imperial Deoband. Deoband was a very important part of the Gandhiji's non-cooperation movement,
Right.
also called the Khilafat movement. I think mistakenly called the Khilafat movement, but there it is. And they were very legitimate partners. I mean, in fact, the Deobandis, if you like, I mean, the Madani family, he was the principal, Maulana Maddi was the principal leader of that. But of course, there was Maulana Muhammad Ali and so on and so forth who were on a parallel streak. But the Deobandis, I mean, Maulana Azad would be considered kind of the Congress part with similar thinking, particularly in his publication Al-Hilal and so on. They were very strong in their desire for unity, for an all-India, pan-Indian, rather than pan-Islamic unity. And that is why a person like Jinnah was never part of this movement. So to say that, and the Jinnah took up the strand, very strangely, from a combination of the encouragement that the British gave him and a combination of the extremist Islam in the 1930s, by then, not before that, picked it up and created the Pakistan movement. I must also stress, it's very, very important to understand that nobody was more devious than the British colonial system. When they say they gave us democracy, it is complete bizarre rubbish. There was no democracy because the vote was limited to only 10%. How can you have democracy which in a vote which is limited to only 10%? And those 10% will be defined by economic status. So it was a vote only for an economic oligarchy or a ruling class, if you like. And they were allowed to determine the fate of India, never the Indian masses, never the poor people, never the poor Muslim.
Right.
And it's extremely important, I think, to remember that.
And coming to separate electorates that were demanded by the Muslim League. So, in your book, you're very categorical in pointing out that the idea of separate electorates dates back to Shah Waliullah's thought and the theory of distance that you elaborate on, that Hindus and Muslims, their practices, because they're different, so in order to keep Islam pure, Muslim practices have to be separated.
It's not simply pure.
Okay.
You have to see an extension of that straight. It's a direct straight line
Right.
to this so-called Field Marshal Munir's speech.
Right, right.
which a few months ago, just before the awful terrorist attack, in which he says it's a speech of supremacism, not a supreme equality, that because we belong to a certain faith, we are superior, we are supremacist. And he says it's not only we are superior and supremacist to Hindus, we are also to Christians, we are also to everybody. In fact, when I was traveling abroad to explain what had happened in Kashmir, the terrorist attack in Kashmir, after his speech, and that speech is a kind of prelude or ideological basis for the attack. And this point is extremely important. What really is the nature of that attack that took place, the last attack took place, Pahalgam? You see, it's not just another terrorist event. After all, terrorism takes place, unfortunately, regrettably, everywhere. It has happened so many times. Why did the Prime Minister Modi, send delegations abroad? Not simply to say that, we need to make you aware of terrorism. The world is aware of terrorism. It has suffered. But the moment you start stripping men in order to determine their religion and then kill them, then you're no longer what I would call a terrorist. You are indulging in fascist ethnic cleansing on the basis of supremacism as your ideology. And that really is what the state of Pakistan has become.
Right.
It has become a nation which has completely cut itself away from its own culture, own historic culture. Can you imagine Pakistan denying, for example, the Indus Valley civilization as part of its heritage?
Yeah.
It's a stupidity, it's an absurdity, because culture is much older than faith. Any faith. I mean,
Right.
any faith in the world. Every faith in the world has a kind of starting point, but culture goes far beyond that. Language goes far beyond that. And even that, indeed, if you look at the Quran, you will find ayats and you will find verses which confirm this. Because in the Quran, God says that I have sent the message to you in every language.
Right.
Not just in one language. That means he has sent the message in some form or the other to every community.
Right.
God is always described as Rabbul Alameen,
Right.
the Rabb of the whole Alam, the whole universe. He is never described as Rabbul Muslimin,
Right.
the only God of Muslims. Therefore, Pratik, he created you as much as he created me, irrespective of our faiths. So, what right do we have to live? We are both his creation. What right do we have to fight over faith in this world?
True. Another question on 19th century, that why is it that it's only North India that has germinated, that has been home to myriad schools of thought in political Islam? We have the Barelvis, we have the Deobandis, even Maulana Maududi, he migrated to Lahore eventually. So is there something inherent in the North and the Northwest that we had so many ideological streams coming out from this area? Why not the South?
Well, one of the reasons, it's a very, very good question, and perhaps only a student of history would ask this question. The North has been the scene of conflict for 1,000 years in a way that the South has never been. The North has seen shifting paradigms in the search for this elusive thing called an identity, right? What I would call factional identities rather than an Indian identity. And one of the great important struggles of modern India, of course, is to re-establish the Indian identity on the basis of our own cultural history, on the basis, and as I was saying at the launch of my new book,
Right.
After Me Chaos, Astrology in the Mughal Empire, which again is a very fascinating take on the cultural history of the Mughal Empire. And they say that culture is a stand which integrates, right? You can't take Bengali away from Bengali Muslims. You cannot take Bhasha away from Indonesian Muslims, right? Therefore, you have in the creation of Pakistan, that's why Bangladesh could not coexist with Pakistan, because Pakistan has turned itself into a dysfunctional state. As I think I used the term in Tinderbox, a jelly state.
Jelly state.
What is a jelly state? A jelly state is, butter will melt.
Right.
Jelly won't melt. So Pakistan won't disappear. But like jelly, it will be continuously unstable. And because it has nuclear power and a terrorist ideology, it will have a toxic instability which it seeks to export all the time, even as that toxicity is destroying its own fundamental abilities. It does not have institutions. It is still in the grip of a oligarchic economic ruling class, which created the idea of Pakistan. And therefore, just to give you one figure, I know an interview like this doesn't have eternity in terms of time on its side and must stop somewhere. But it must be the only country in the world where poverty has increased in this century. In the last 10 years, we have taken poverty out of our history.
Right.
Today's latest World Bank figures, and I remember what harsh poverty we used to see when we were young. And today, in the last 10 years, poverty has been removed from 25% right down to less than 2%. Marginal fact. And we have a tremendous social welfare scheme.
Right.
800 million people getting food. This is what national unity and progress and modernity is all about. The elimination of hunger. An equitable economy. You will never have, we'll never have an economy without inequalities, right? At least you must have one with equity.
Yeah.
Instead, Pakistan has actually seen a rise of wealth into the grip of one class, the control of the whole nation by an army. I may add here that Pakistan fell into the grip of the army in less than 10 years. And what is the difference between a civilian government and an army government? So, a civilian government knows, irrespective of what system it operates, that its survival depends on how much benefit it can transfer to the people.
Right.
There is no other metric, frankly. Yes, emotionalism is used, we all know that. But the basic metric is my life better?
Right.
An army government survives on the basis of perpetuation of conflict.
Right.
That is its metric. And therefore, since army rule, you will see, the army has consistently destroyed any hope of peace on our subcontinent.
You talked about unity, and there's a very peculiar question which critics have posed. Again, it takes us to the partition era, which is that even the institutions, even the Muslims who wanted to stay back in India, they had a very specific request.
The majority of Muslims stayed back in India.
Exactly. So when we look into what the critics feel, that the moment they demanded a personal law, that itself becomes a kind of a conditional bargain. Is that true, or there are more explanations to
in the evolution of what we would call social change?
Right.
It's an evolution. After all, when 1947, we had continuation of Hindu law.
Right.
Hindu reform of Hindu law came much earlier, right? And it's very welcome. It took the Shabano case for awareness to be built up about the need for reform in Muslim law. And for a large number of reasons, there was a continuous effort to block reform. But in reality, we have moved a very long way.
Okay.
We have moved a long way. It's no longer, this arbitrary system of marriage and arbitrary system of, talaq, for example, has been ended by this government.
Right.
Right? And I remember when this legislation was being passed, there was the usual cacophony. This would lead to fire, this would lead to this thing. Led to nothing because the women welcomed it. Half the Muslim population of India is women.
True.
And they are the victims
Right.
of laws that have been imposed upon them, not by God, but imposed upon by them by men acting in the name of God.
Right. You've covered Indian politics, especially when we talk about 1970s, 1980s, 90s. That was also a time when the developments in the Middle East, especially how...
First, I don't know of a place called the Middle East.
Okay, West Asia.
West Asia. Because, please look at the map.
True.
The only place which is in the middle of the East is India.
True.
So,
Totally.
now, that was in the middle of the British Empire.
Right. So when the political upheavals in West Asia translated into a lot of literary works by scholars and thinkers on political Islam, we know for sure that it had its impact on the Indian subcontinent. But based on your first-hand accounts, your personal observations, did people like Sayyid Qutb or his contemporaries, did their writings shape what's happening in, say, India or Pakistan? How did that transpire in that era, if you...
Well, if you know English poetry,
Right.
No man is an island.
Right.
No thought stream, is curtained off completely. So their impact, particularly in the academic world, in the world which is, shall we say, professional thinkers. But the evolution of the Indian mind and Indian Muslim mind is from the Indian experience. It is not from any Western Asian experience or indeed Eastern Asian experience. The bulk of Muslims in the world do not live in the Arab world.
Right.
The Arab world is the smallest population of Muslims.
True.
The bulk live in Indonesia,
Right.
Malaysia, Bangladesh, India. This is the true Muslim world.
True.
Right? So, the things that happen in these communities are in fact far more significant than what happened. I'm not saying that what happens in West Asia is not significant. In fact, when you say West Asia, do you mean the Gulf or do you mean Egypt, which is North Africa?
Right.
Right? North African Muslims from Egypt to Morocco are a different story.
Right.
Why do we confuse everything with just the Gulf?
Right. You also visited Karachi and you also visited the Binuri Mosque, which has been home to world's most radical...
Yeah, Osama bin Laden and company.
Right. And you mentioned that you were about to enter the mosque and you came out. Please tell us about your visit to Karachi and the mosque.
Well, I was in Karachi and, I just expressed conversationally a desire to visit the Binuri Mosque.
Yes.
That's headquarters of your extreme radicalism. So, chal ke dekhte hain what goes on out there. And then perhaps, as I said, in a fit of bravado, an acquaintance said that, oh, fine, let's go right now or whenever. And we left, got into our car, left, went there, reached the footsteps of the mosque. There is a rising staircase which takes you to the plinth of the mosque. And as we were actually on the footsteps, suddenly I saw a flicker of panic in my acquaintance's eyes. And he said, no, if they take you hostage there, you will not come back.
Okay.
So let's return. And
Which year was it?
it must have been 2005, 6, 7.
Quite a turbulent time.
Yeah. Oh, yes. Turbulence is endemic in Pakistan. So there is, it has seen, continuous and will continue to see turbulence. Which basically it is not a nation state because it is built on an idea which has no evidence of success in history. It is built on the idea that Islam is sufficient as the basis of a nation state in a modern nation state, which is an absurdity. If Islam had been sufficient as a basis of a nation state, why would there be 22 Arab countries? At a nation state, Islam lives in a mosque. It lives in the world. It cannot be confined to a country.
Right.
A country has different parameters for which language, for example, can be an effective parameter for a country. But then language lives across the divides of faith.
And there's a very strong irony when it comes to Indo-Pak relationship, in a sense that whenever there has been a dialogue, that has always taken place when there's a military general in charge. I've been told and I've read that when it was Ziaul Haq's regime, he was promoting extremist organizations. He was promoting extremism. But when it came to India, he was very particular about increasing cultural ties. Same comes to Musharraf, same comes to what General Bajwa was up to. So why has it been the case that only when it's under a military dictatorship, they have been quite forthcoming on the cultural exchanges?
Who told you that General Zia was interested in cultural exchange?
Okay.
I mean, whoever, you should stop reading wherever you read that. Because he fomented terrorism in India from Punjab, and he was proud of it, by the way. I mean, all through, he did nothing except export. I mean, he was the father of the export of terrorism to India. I mean, he was maybe not the father because the first terrorist export was done by Jinnah when the attack on Kashmir took place. But certainly, General Zia can claim a very prominent role in the pageantry of evil.
Right.
The second, while some of your question is valid, not all of it. The most important deal that was done, which still holds, is the Shimla Agreement. It was done between Mrs. Gandhi and Zulfikar Ali Bhutto, both civilians. The most important talks that took place on the future of Kashmir were held between Swaran Singh and Zulfikar Ali Bhutto.
Right.
A very embarrassing fact in our history, which, we have hidden, frankly. And I think the Prime Minister recently made it more public in Parliament, Prime Minister Modi, in which astonishingly, this was just after our setback in China, when under the premiership of Prime Minister Jawaharlal Nehru, we agreed to give over huge swaths of Kashmir for a final settlement. And the Pakistanis refused. So, but these things, the reason why the generals have taken preeminence, if you like, in the PR of the question, one, because after, since Ayub, they have been power for so long. They have been in power forever. Generals in Pakistan are in power even when they are not in office. And they have a veto on the India relationship. So when they are officially in office as dictators, then they are more flexible
Right.
than civilians can be, because civilians have to always look after over their shoulder or across, or maybe in front of them, because very often the general is in front of them.
Right.
But generals have found more, but the generals have, they cannot go against what would be called in Urdu the wajud,
Right.
the very rationale for existence.
Right.
The rationale for existence was for Pakistan is enmity with India. Please remember one thing. The Pakistan movement never wanted freedom from the British. It wanted freedom from Hindus.
Hmm.
And that is the difference.
Right. And we move to some concluding questions. We had someone like Imran Khan who talked about overhauling the entire political structure of Pakistan, saying that he wants to model Pakistan on the basis of Riasat-e-Medina. So for a commoner who's interested in these topics, what is Riasat-e-Medina and can it be practical?
Well, the Riasat-e-Medina, if you go back to the original concept, the Prophet, peace be upon him, had and we say, I said that deliberately, because the formal association with the Prophet is one with peace, right? And the compact of Medina is a very famous compact in which all communities had an equation by which they could live together and practice their faith. The compact of Medina, it has a Quranic verse, Lakum dinakum wa ilya din, your faith for you, my faith for me. And that is a basis on which all rational nations should exist. So, I mean, if Imran Khan wants a state on the basis of your faith for you and my faith for me, he should immediately turn Pakistan into a secular state and remove, right, an appendage in which one faith has supremacy. Let every faith live as equals. And maybe that will be the salvation of Pakistan.
And some questions on the present dynamic. And so one on the recent visit of the Afghan Foreign Affairs Minister. He was received in Deoband with a lot of fanfare, and there were hundreds of thousands of people to welcome him. How do you see that transpiring? Because there's been always this whole apprehension that now that the Taliban and the Deoband are talking to each other directly, that's good in a way that you have the Pakistani Deobandis are out of the scene. But there is an apprehension when I read the other side of the story that what if, because of the legitimacy which they have got, they can easily talk about so many other problems in India or anywhere else. So
You must understand one thing, that for the Afghan, whether the Afghan are kings, shahs, Karzais, Gilanis, civilian government, the key to their understanding of the state is Afghan nationalism.
oh, very nice.
Right? And Afghan nationalism for them is without compromise. No matter who has come to power in Afghanistan, and this is now more than 130 years, right? They have never accepted the Durand line. One of the greatest ambitions of Benazir Bhutto, who actually created the first Taliban movement in 1990s, which took over power then of Mullah Umar, right, was that now that we have sent and created this government in Kabul, we can settle the Durand line problem forever. It didn't happen. It still hasn't happened. The Quetta Taliban, which was again sent to power, right, after having sanctuary, they never abandoned the Afghan national interest.
Hmm.
And the Afghan national interest will be at odds with Pakistan for a variety of reasons, which would probably require another discussion. But India, in defense of its own national interests, we cannot determine that we will always be able to control the nature of the government we are dealing with. If that was the case, why would we be dealing with the dictatorial communist government in China? It is up to China, or whatever terms, comes. Whoever is in power in Beijing will have to deal with it.
Right.
So Kabul also, I think it's very rational to understand that you have to deal with it and come to an equation.
Right.
And certainly Pakistan's effort to create a sort of a backup where it eliminates the tensions on one front and can concentrate all its capability, military capability, only on the Indian front, is obviously not in our interest.
Right. My last question, and it also takes us back to a 2-decade-old controversy, but nevertheless I thought of asking this question because I was genuinely interested in your thoughts. In 2005, Mr. Advani visits the mazar of Mr. Jinnah. And I think it's like based on his experiences, based on his understanding of the idea of Pakistan, and he's someone who's lived there before he came to India. That becomes a controversy because he has a filtered down view of Mr. Jinnah. And that also relates to one argument that you're making, that Mr. Jinnah is trying to create a secular state out of.
He didn't at all. No, where did I argue that he created?
Okay.
He created the world's most communal state.
Okay.
He personally professed
Right.
as an individual a sort of secularism as his personal creed.
Exactly. That's what.
But that is his personal creed.
True.
He created a state which became a fortress of not only extremism, but has become a fortress of absurdity.
True.
So, I think Jinnah, he destroyed the unity of India.
Right.
But the biggest damage that Jinnah did was to the Muslims of India.
True. And in conclusion, how do we segregate that the legal arguments that usually the Muslim League would make, and on the other hand, they would carry out propaganda?
Yes, they only people who needed poison to create a nation.
Right.
Right. So the attempt was, they never had anything which heals, which unites,
Right.
which brings people together. Their only poison was, their only weapon was poison. Their only sort of purpose was achieved through the Great Calcutta Killing of 1946.
Direct action.
And, even till the end in Punjab, they never won an election. Even the separate electoral elections, they never actually won in Punjab. They created a nation on territory in which they had actually never won elections, right? Except in the shadow of great violence. The frontier defeated them in the 46 and 46 elections, I repeat, where elections were only 10% voted. They were defeated in frontier. You can see what is happening in the frontier right now.
Right.
Sindh, they had an artificial victory, very artificial victory. Punjab, even till the end, they did not win the elections. They did not get a majority, despite the disarray in the non-league forces. So, the nation has been built on a lie,
Right.
and a lie eventually will be defeated by the historical and cultural truth.
Thank you so much for your time and such insightful answers. And so as we saw, Mr. Akbar answered our questions with his deep insights into how political Islam, how a history of Muslim thought, how Muslim League's politics, it all congealed into an idea which is now turning on itself. We'll be back with more such interesting conversations. Please stay tuned.